Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Monday, April 18th, 2022. A federal judge voiding the COVID-19 national mask mandate for airlines and public transit, saying the CDC overstepped its authority. The mandate was just recently extended by the Biden administration for 2 more weeks. We'll get reaction from the White House. Biden administration also auctioning new leases to drill for oil on federal land to increase production and bring down high gas prices, critics saying President Biden breaking a campaign promise. Russian President Vladimir Putin claiming the U.S. and other nations' sanctions in response to his war in Ukraine have not hurt Russia as much as it has hurt the West. And the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying the big battle for the eastern part of his country, the Donbass, has begun. It's tax day in the U.S. Republican Senator Rick Scott defending his policy agenda against charges that it would increase taxes on lower and middle income Americans. And children enjoy the White House Easter egg roll, returning to a longtime tradition that was shelved the past couple of years due to the coronavirus pandemic. And now an update on mask mandates for airplanes and public trains and buses. A federal judge in Florida overturning the national mandate, saying U.S. health officials exceeded their authority during the coronavirus pandemic. CDC recently extended the mandate, which was set to expire today, until May 3rd to allow more time to study the BA.2 Omicron subvariant of coronavirus. It's now responsible for the vast majority of cases in the U.S. District judge in Florida, in Tampa, an appointee of former President Donald Trump, writing, "Because our system does not permit agencies to act unlawfully, even in pursuit of desirable ends, the court declares unlawful and vacates the mask mandate." She also said the only remedy was to vacate the rule entirely across the country because it would be impossible to end it for the limited group of people who objected in the lawsuit. Here's the question to the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
A federal judge in Florida says the CDC exceeded its authority with the mask mandate in airports. What's the White House position?
The CDC recommended continuing the order for additional time, 2 weeks, to be able to assess the latest science in keeping with its responsibility to protect the American people. So this is obviously a disappointing decision. The CDC continues recommending wearing a mask in public transit. As you know, this just came out this afternoon. So right now, the Department of Homeland Security, who would be implementing, and the CDC are reviewing the decision. And of course, the Department of Justice would make any determinations about litigation.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican, was not directly involved in this case, but he has spoken out against many government coronavirus requirements, writing on Twitter, "Great to see a federal judge in Florida follow the law and reject the Biden transportation mask mandate. Both airline employees and passengers deserve to have this misery end." Now to oil drilling on federal land. The Interior Department this week saying it's auctioning off leases to drill on 145,000 acres of public land in 9 states: Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Montana, Alabama, Nevada, North Dakota, and Oklahoma. The New York Times writes, the move comes as President Biden seeks to show voters that he is working to increase the domestic oil supply as prices surge in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But it also violates a signature campaign pledge made by Mr. Biden as he sought to assure climate activists that he would prioritize reducing the use of fossil fuels. Back to the White House briefing. Question to the Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
On this move to restart the sale of leases for drilling on public lands, how long do you think it will take for these new leases to actually start producing, and what impact do you think this may have on gas prices?
Well, let me first say that today's action, as you know, but for everybody, was the result of a court injunction that we continue to appeal, and it's not in line with the president's policy, which is to ban additional leasing, because one, we need to move towards a more clean energy economy, which he strongly believes in, but also because there are 9,000 permits unused on lands that could be tapped into by oil companies, and we don't feel they are needed. In terms of how long it will take to get up drilling because of the court action, I don't have any assessment on that from here. I would just note that we are going to continue to fight this court injunction that is forcing our hand in allowing this to proceed, even as we have taken actions to reduce by 80% the areas to lease and impose stringent environmental standards.
The president has promised to slash greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030. Now you're having to expand production of fossil fuels when you promised to curtail them. Congress, as we know, has yet to act on many of your climate proposals. Is the president's ambitious climate change goal and agenda still attainable, or are these new leases going to undercut that pledge?
Well, again, these leases are not in line with our policy or the president's view.
Whether it's your, policy or not, I mean, this is the situation that you're in.
It is, and we're going to continue. There's obviously we're going to continue to fight this legal action. But I would say that the president remains committed. Addressing the climate crisis is one of the 4 pillars that he came in. He ran on as president, and he will continue to fight for. One of the reasons that this was so troubling to him is because he is so committed to that objective as president, and we have continued to propose a historic investment in addressing the climate crisis, something that we will continue to discuss with Congress. So there are a lot of ways to get there, that we will continue to work with Congress to take actions, but he has also not hesitated to take actions himself through his own authorities to take actions to help our climate.
But are you still confident that goal is achievable?
We are continuing to pursue it, and we're going to continue to do everything we can to reach it.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki with reporters in the White House briefing room. Interior Department also announcing that royalty rates for the new drilling leases on federal land are going to increase from 12.5% to 18.75%. It's the first time that royalties to the federal government have gone up for these drilling leases since they were imposed in 1920. Russian President Vladimir Putin saying sanctions by the U.S. and other Western countries following what Russia calls its special military operation in Ukraine, what the rest of the world calls an invasion, have failed. He said in a TV address the economic blitzkrieg strategy didn't work, and it's the West paying a heavy price with inflation and rising unemployment. U.S. Treasury Deputy Secretary Wally Adeyemo today saying the sanctions against Russia have hurt that country's economy.
The multilateral coalition President Biden has helped assemble is animated by a basic idea that you cannot violate the sovereignty of another country and continue to enjoy the privileges of integration into the global economy. A position reflected in our swift and decisive actions to counter Russia's aggression. The effects of our actions are already evident. Russia's economy is expected to contract by 10%, their worst contraction since Russia's economic crisis over 20 years ago. Russia has seen inflation spike, with the World Bank estimating inflation will reach 22% over the course of this year. Analysts forecast that imports could fall as much as 37%, and that domestic demand could decline over 11%. The economic crisis Russia faces will leave the Kremlin with fewer resources to prop up Russia's economy, pursue its invasion in Ukraine, and project power in the future. At the same time, we have taken pains to mitigate the impact of our actions on the global economy. This includes permitting energy market payments, as well as providing broad carve-outs for humanitarian, medical, and agricultural transactions. But despite our efforts, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, its disruption of shipping lanes, and other destabilizing activity is the most significant headwind for the global economy since the initial pandemic-induced economic shock in March of 2020.
Treasury's Deputy Secretary Wally Adeyemo at an event hosted by the Peterson Institute for International Economics. This week is the start of the spring meetings of the World Bank Group and International Monetary Fund. And Adeyemo also saying today there are going to be some announcements on efforts to help countries unable to weather the fallout from the coordinated sanctions against Russia.
But it's important for us to realize that Russia's actions today do not only threaten the peace and stability of Europe, they're having an impact on the global economy. As you know, Russia and Ukraine are major exporters of critical commodities. Russia's war of choice is disrupting supply chains, destroying Ukraine's crops, and creating uncertainty for energy markets. While we can take steps in the United States and other advanced economies to mitigate the impact of Russia's invasion on our citizens, developed Developing economies are forced to pay a high cost for Russia's invasion of Ukraine as they face rising food and energy prices. This is why Secretary Yellen plans this week to call on policymakers to take steps to address the challenges Russia's invasion of Ukraine is creating for developing economies around the world. We must not allow Russia's invasion of Ukraine to further burden countries still struggling to deal with a global pandemic.
Wally Adeyemo is the Treasury Deputy Secretary, referring to the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen. His opening remarks at a virtual event hosted by the Peterson Institute for International Economics. We covered it in its entirety. You can find the video at our website, cspan.org. From Associated Press, Russia launched its long-feared full-scale offensive to take control of Ukraine's east, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced Monday. He said, "Now we can already state that the Russian troops have begun to battle for the Donbass, for which they've been preparing for a long time." Zelensky said a significant part of the entire Russian army is now concentrated on this offensive. He said that in a video address. The AP article goes on, the announcement from Zelensky came as Russia bombarded the western city of Lviv and numerous other targets across Ukraine. It would appear to be an intensified bid to grind down the country's defenses. At the same time, the Kremlin continued building up its forces in the east. Some analysis from the Pentagon with Press Secretary John Kirby.
What signs you might be seeing of an imminent escalation in the Russian offensive in the Donbass based on recent airstrike activity or other things that you're monitoring?
So I would say just kind of reset what we've seen over the last couple of days, and hopefully this will get at your question. I mean, we have seen the Russians continue to flow in enablers, capabilities that will help them fight in the Donbass going forward. That's artillery, rotary aviation, helicopter support, command and control enablers, and we do believe that they have reinforced the number of battalion tactical groups in the east and the south of Ukraine. Now, we can't say specifically where all these battalions, these tactical groups are going, but we have seen over the last few days that they've added now more than 10 to what they already had there in that part of the country. Separate and distinct from that, Bob, we have continued to see the concentration of their airstrikes and artillery in the Donbass and in the south, particularly around and in Mariupol. That's where the preponderance of their strike activity has gone, and the fighting with Mariupol, as you guys have all seen, continues. The Ukrainians are still resisting. The city has not fallen to the Russians, but they continue to pound it from the air and through long-range fires. So it's been just over the last several days, you can continue to see the Russians are doing what we call shaping. They're trying to set the conditions for more aggressive, more overt, and larger ground maneuvers in the Donbass. But again, I would remind, this is an area of the country that has seen fighting over the last 8 years. This is a terrain that both sides understand and know, and the Ukrainians, it's not like they ever left the Donbass and only have been, racing to get there in the last few days. They have been there throughout this invasion and throughout the last 8 years, and they continue to fight very, very strongly for places in the Donbass. And we have seen indications in just the last few days that the Ukrainians not only have defended bravely, but they have been able to secure certain villages and towns in the Donbass.
Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby and the Secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council saying on Ukrainian TV the Russian forces are launching an effort to break through Ukrainian front lines in 3 regions in the eastern part of that country, Luhansk, Donetsk, and Kharkiv regions. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights reporting today that officially 2,072 civilians have been killed in the fighting in Ukraine and another 2,818 injured, but that the actual casualty numbers are likely considerably higher since reports are not yet in from areas with the heaviest fighting, such as the city of Mariupol. Former U.S. Secretary of State under President George W. Bush, Condoleezza Rice, talking about how she thinks the war is going so far. She starts by refuting Russian President Vladimir Putin's claim that it was NATO's expansion that forced his hand.
I dealt with Vladimir Putin for 8 years. Not until democracies started in places like Ukraine and Georgia did he become obsessed with NATO expansion. He never mentioned it in the years before because it really wasn't an issue for him. The issue for him is the reestablishment of Greater Russia, and to do so in a way that protects him and Russia from democracy, because he really does worry about contagion of democracy from a place like Ukraine into Russia. And it's awfully important to get inside his mindset to understand that, because I think it makes it very hard to see an end game that would be acceptable to the Ukrainians, let alone the rest of the world, and to Vladimir Putin. And so I think they will eventually get to a stalemate. I don't know that it'll be a way to get to peace, because one thing that Putin has done with his brutality in the East is he's turned Russian-speaking populations against Russia. The way that people have fought in Kharkiv, the way people have fought in Mariupol, these are places with large Russian populations, Russian-speaking populations, and they also want the Russians out because they want Ukrainian democracy. And he underestimated the degree to which Ukraine is a real country, and he underestimated the degree to which the West would respond. And oh, by the way, he overestimated his own armed forces, which have just behaved miserably. I mean, this is it's really quite a show to see how much money they spent on these armed forces and how poorly they performed.
Condoleezza Rice was Secretary of State under President George W. Bush, speaking today at the annual University of Montana Mansfield Lecture, held virtually. Also speaking at the lecture beside her, Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia under President Obama. He agreed that NATO expansion is a false reason given by President Putin for invading Ukraine. McFaul also saying Putin's military strategy has been less than ideal.
I think Putin did overreach. I think he thought this was going to be easy. This is kind of like his Afghanistan, as it was for Brezhnev, where he won some easy wars and then he overstretched here, and that's good news as far as I'm concerned. But three, in terms of my best guess, I do think he's changed. And according to me, he's on Plan D, right? Plan A, shock and awe, didn't work. Zelensky didn't run. The Ukrainians didn't run away. Plan B, to seize all the major cities, that didn't work. Plan C, to bomb them into oblivion, except for Mariupol, that hasn't worked. So now he's on to Plan D, which is to try to connect Crimea in the south to Donbass in the east. And if you look with the focus on that city of Mariupol, we've all been looking at the maps on TV every day. That seems to be his next objective. The Ukrainians' objective is to stop that. And I think we are going to see a very conventional war in that part of the country. And I can't predict how it'll end, but I think it will be the biggest war we've seen in Europe since World War II. What I hope is either the Ukrainians win and or they fight to a stalemate. I think the stalemate is more likely. And then I hope that could create the permissive conditions for a peace settlement.
Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia at the annual University of Montana Mansfield Lecture, along with Condoleezza Rice. The lecture series named for former U.S. Senator Mike Mansfield, Democrat from Montana, who served from 1953 through 77, last 16 years as the Senate Majority Leader, which is the longest serving ever in that role. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also today formally submitting Ukraine's answers to a questionnaire from the European Union, the first step in his effort to get accelerated EU membership for Ukraine. AP writes that Zelensky says he handed 2 thick binders of Ukrainian responses to the EU's envoy for Ukraine. People of Ukraine are united by this goal. We feel they are an equal part of Europe. From CBS, North Korea claimed it successfully test-fired a new type of missile capable of carrying nuclear warheads over the weekend, just before the U.S. and South Korea began a joint cyber military exercise. It was the 12th North Korean missile test in 3.5 months, and a sign that the country's leader, Kim Jong-un, is fast-tracking a serious upgrade to his already fearsome arsenal. Biden administration says it remains open to dialogue, but there's no sign of engagement or what terms might convince North Korea to negotiate. That from CBS News. More on this from the State Department briefing today in Washington with spokesman Ned Price.
When it comes to the DPRK's most recent provocations, I know that the Department of Defense issued a statement on this. They noted that the department was aware of the DPRK's statement, that they conducted a test of a long-range artillery system. As you know, we're closely monitoring the situation on the Korean Peninsula, and we have warned of the possibility of additional potential provocations from the DPRK. It just so happens that our special envoy for the DPRK is currently in Seoul. He had a series of meetings in Seoul earlier today. He spoke publicly as well to make the point that his engagement with our ROK allies showcases the coordination and underscores our rock-solid commitment to the region. Ambassador Sung Kim went on to say that we're determined to protect the security of the United States and that of our allies, the ROK and Japan. And he noted that our goal continues to be the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Sung Kim, Deputy Secretary Sherman, Secretary Blinken have engaged regularly, bilaterally, with our ROK counterparts, bilaterally with our Japanese allies, trilaterally with our ROK and Japanese allies together. We have, in all of those engagements, sought to make very clear to the DPRK that the door to diplomacy is not closed, that it does remain open, but that the DPRK needs to cease its destabilizing actions and instead choose the path of engagement, something it has not yet done. We are willing to listen to the full range of the DPRK's concerns, but this can only happen through dialogue, and the DPRK has not yet given any concrete indications that it is open to this dialogue. They have done this notwithstanding the fact that we've made clear on many occasions, including right here, that we harbor no hostile intent towards the DPRK. And we've also made clear that we are willing to meet without preconditions to engage in this dialogue. Unfortunately, it is the DPRK that has failed to respond to our invitations, and instead, they have engaged in this series of provocations, including the ICBM launches in recent weeks. We have worked with our allies in the region, we've worked with our allies well beyond the region, and we've worked in the UN context to make clear our condemnation of these recent ballistic missile tests, each of which was in violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions. These launches, these tests have demonstrated that the DPRK continues to prioritize its WMD and ballistic missile programs at the expense of regional and international security. And in response to these provocations, in whole and in part, we have taken a series of diplomatic, economic, and military measures. We've detailed them in some depth, both from here and throughout this administration. Our actions are intended to make clear to the DPRK that its escalatory behavior has consequences. Those consequences will continue as long as the DPRK continues with its provocations.
State Department spokesman Ned Price. U.S.-led diplomacy to convince North Korea to abandon its nuclear ambitions in return for economic and political sanctions relief largely at a stalemate since 2019. That's when former President Donald Trump walked out of a summit meeting in Vietnam with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Washington Today continues in a minute.
Longtime Congressman Don Young died recently. Representative Young's legacy included being the longest-serving Republican in the history of the U.S. House, Alaska's only U.S. House member from 1973 until his death, and the last remaining member of the House who was there on March 19, 1979, when live TV coverage of Congress and C-SPAN began. He was also known for taking care of Alaskans, and he represented them all.
My biggest, I would say, best part of it, I've helped an awful lot of people individually. And that's been the key to my success. Communities, yes, but individuals. That's what I am. And but big time, you look on my wall, you got some of the major pieces of legislation on my wall, which affect the nation, but mainly Alaska.
One specific way Representative Young helped his Alaska communities was a legislative practice called earmarks. Despite having a different name now, they live on. In this episode of C-SPAN's podcast, The Weekly, we remember Don Young and his longtime advocacy for earmarks. C-SPAN's The Weekly. Find it and follow wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile video app and wherever you get your podcasts. President Joe Biden is going back on the road this week. We spoke to a White House reporter for the details.
Get an update on the week ahead at the White House and the administration. We're joined next by White House reporter for The Hill, Morgan Chalfant. Good morning.
Good morning.
President did a bunch of travel last week, going to North Carolina and Iowa. Any travel on the president's plans this week? And if so, what's it all about?
Yes, it's a big travel week, and Biden's certainly ramping up his travel across the country. This week, he's going to be visiting New Hampshire on Tuesday. That's going to be pretty much focused on promoting the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed last year. And then later in the week, he's going to be going out west, traveling first to Oregon and then to Washington. The Oregon trip is going to be really focused again on promoting the bipartisan infrastructure law. And then in Seattle and Washington, he's going to be talking a lot about his climate priorities, his climate agenda, and some of those elements of the Build Back Better that was the Build Back Better bill that he still wants to try to get passed in Congress.
How much of these local trips are also part of the president, the administration's reelection, the campaign for and push for local candidates in the 2022 elections?
I think it's certainly a large part of it. And, you know, the White House has been clear that Biden really wants to get out on the road and do more talking to people and engaging with people. I think that's been hampered a little bit by the war in Ukraine and the degree to which he has to be focused on that. But a lot of it is meeting with and being with these officials, especially those in tight re-election races. You know, New Hampshire, for example, there's Maggie Hassan, Chris Pappas. I'm sure we're going to see some of these elected officials alongside Biden, speaking with Biden and him, you know, talking about them and trying to kind of drum up support ahead of the looming midterms. You
wrote last week about the administration's announcement, the president's announcement, his nominee, the new nominee for the Fed. Is Michael Barr. Biden to nominate Michael Barr as Fed's top banking regulator. Morgan Chalfant, in the wake of the failed attempt to get Sarah Bloom Raskin appointed to the Fed, how is the administration approaching a strategy for moving Michael Barr through the Senate?
Well, I think a key element of this is that bipartisan support. Biden wants someone who's going to be able to get votes across the aisle so that they can easily move through, so that, you know, not only do they get enough votes in the Senate, but also there isn't drama around their nomination. I think the problem with Raskin was that the Republicans really objected to her. And of course, Joe Manchin came out against her, and that's really what sunk her nomination. So it's really important for the White House to get these nominees through expediently. And, you know, it's been months since he renominated Jerome Powell, and the other nominees have been languishing for several weeks. So they really want to get it, get these nominees through as quickly as possible.
You talked a little bit about what the president will speak about on the road. Close at home, on Capitol Hill, what is the White House focusing on? What do they want, aside from nominees, obviously, what are their top priorities?
They're extremely focused on this bipartisan semiconductor legislation, which of course passed. There was a version that passed the Senate and a version that passed the House, and now they're coming together on a bipartisan compromise. Now there's definitely hangups and issues they need to work through, but the White House really wants this CHIPS bill to get across the finish line. It's an example again of the president trying to get bipartisan support, bipartisan work on an element of his agenda, and it's also one of the White House's focuses when it comes to addressing supply chain issues. So long-term supply chain issues that have to do with these shortages of semiconductors, chips. So this is a very important part of the White House trying to address and deliver for the public on part of their agenda that addresses that.
Morgan Chalfant covers the White House for The Hill. You can read her reporting at thehill.com. We appreciate the update this morning. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
An interview from this morning's Washington Journal on C-SPAN. The House and Senate are not in session this week. on the second week of a 2-week break, but they are back next week. You can follow the House live, gavel to gavel, on C-SPAN television, the Senate live on C-SPAN 2, or both on the free C-SPAN Now mobile video app. Today is tax day, deadline for most people in the country to file federal income tax returns or request an extension. Residents in Massachusetts and Maine have until tomorrow because today is a holiday in those states, Patriots' Day. White House today putting out a statement attacking a proposed tax plan by Senator Rick Scott, Republican of Florida. White House saying that Scott would raise taxes on middle-class and lower-income Americans versus President Biden's proposal, they say, which includes the child tax credit and subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. More from the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
As part of Tax Day, we're highlighting the real difference between the president and congressional Republicans. President Biden has a simple philosophy. The middle class deserves some financial breathing room, which is why his economic plan would give tax relief to tens of millions of families who work hard and deserve a little extra cushion each month. And the president believes billionaires should pay their fair share so we can invest in our economic future and cut the deficit. That's why he's calling on the top 1% of the top 1% to pay a minimum tax of 20%, when right now the wealthiest families can pay a lower average rate than teachers. And let me be crystal clear, the president will not raise taxes for anyone making under $400,000. The congressional Republican plan, however, as Senator Rick Scott outlined, couldn't be more different. Republicans on Capitol Hill are more than happy to pass a nearly $2 trillion tax giveaway to the wealthy and big corporations under the previous administration. But now, led by Senator Scott, Republicans want to raise taxes on the middle class, with one independent analysis showing their plan would hike taxes by an average of around $1,500 each year on 75 million American families, 96% of whom make under $100,000. That's the plan of congressional Republicans: tax hikes for the middle class, tax hikes for the wealthy and big corporations. President Biden disagrees. It's time to put the middle class first.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Senator Rick Scott was on Fox News Sunday this weekend, asked about his tax proposal, part of a larger agenda he has put forward.
You recently put out an 11-point plan to rescue America, two of the big points of which are, quote, all Americans should pay some income tax to have skin in the game, even if a small amount. Currently, over half of Americans pay no income tax. It also says all federal legislation sunsets in 5 years. If a law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again. So that would raise taxes on half of Americans and potentially sunset programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Why would you propose something like that in an election year?
Sure. Well, John, that's, of course, the Democrat talking points. It's a 11-step plan.
No, it's in the plan. It's in the plan.
But here's let's think about reality for a second. First off, let's talk about Medicare.
But Senator, hang on, John. So it's not a Democratic talking point. It's in the plan.
And also in the plan, it says we ought to every year talk about exactly how we're going to fix Medicare and Social Security. Here's what's happening. No one that I know of wants to sunset Medicare or Social Security. But what we're doing is we don't even talk about it. Medicare goes bankrupt in 4 years. Social Security goes bankrupt in 12 years. I think we ought to figure out how we preserve those programs. Every program that we care about, we ought to stop and take the time to preserve those programs. I just fought the postal bill because it put more responsibility on Medicare and took it off the Postal Service and put Medicare in a worse position. Now, let's go back. Let's talk about taxes for a second. I'll put my record up against anybody on tax cuts. I cut taxes and fees 100 times as governor. But here's what's unfair. We have people that could go to work and have figured out how to have government pay their way. That's not right. They ought to have some skin in the game. I don't care if it's $1. We ought to all be in this together. I'm going to continue to focus on reducing taxes. That's what I've done my whole life. But there's an 11-step plan. Go through it. Everybody's not going to agree with everything. 128 policy points. Let's be bold. Go to rescueamerica.com. Give me your ideas, or you can text America to 22044. Give me your ideas. I want to change this country. The woke left controls everything. We got to win, and we got to change the country.
Senator Rick Scott, Republican from Florida, on Fox News Sunday with the host, John Roberts. As of April 8th, writes USA Today, more than 103 million federal tax returns were filed. The IRS estimates it's going to receive more than 160 million returns this year. And for taxpayers getting a refund, their deposit or check likely larger than in 2021. IRS data showing refunds averaging $3,175 this season, nearly 10% higher than last year. Supreme Court today declining to review a challenge to the $10,000 ceiling imposed on state and local tax deduction, known as SALT. It was part of the 2017 tax law. New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and Connecticut had sued the federal government over the deduction cap. Associated Press explains in a 2019 ruling, a federal judge in New York ruled that the states had not been able to prove that the cap was unconstitutionally coercive, underscoring that the cap does not inherently limit the state's decision-making power on how to tax and that the states remain free to exercise their tax power however they wish. And the Supreme Court today saying they won't get involved in the case. On Wall Street, the Dow down 39, S&P down 18. S&P down a fraction, NASDAQ down 18.
Good morning and welcome to the Easter egg roll.
First Lady Jill Biden and President Joe Biden on the White House South Lawn, kicking off the White House Easter egg roll despite a rainy day. The two hosting an estimated 30,000 children and adults. Speaking from the balcony.
And I are so excited that you are here. As your First Lady and as a teacher, I've seen again and again that learning doesn't only happen in a classroom. There are so many fun opportunities to learn around us every day. And that's especially true here at the White House. For generations, presidents and first ladies and kids just like you celebrated the Easter egg roll together, racing and making crafts, reading books, and of course, meeting the Easter Bunny. Education never stops. The determined spirit of education is what we wanted to honor in this Easter egg roll. So we turned the South Lawn into a school community. Today, we hope you learn by going to the Reading Nook, roll some eggs, and most of all, have fun. Welcome to your house, the people's house. Happy Easter. Now please welcome my husband, our President, Joe Biden. Sorry.
My job is to keep it from raining for another 2 minutes. Jill and I are excited to have you at the White House. We weren't able to host this Easter egg roll last year because of the pandemic, but this year we're finally getting together again, and it's so special. It means so much to see and hear the children and all the families show up to be here today. The joy, the laughter, and the occasional, at least with my young grandson, it's only 2, the occasional, there's Easter Bunny. A little startled sometimes. But the joy and the laughter is something that has been a wonderful tradition here at the White House for a long, long time. I especially want to thank the White House Historical Association, the National Park Service, and America's Egg Board for all their hard work to make this day possible. Let's give them a round of applause. To all of you, have fun today. Welcome to the White House. Welcome to your house. Welcome to the South Lawn. Thank you and happy, happy Easter. All right.
President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden standing next to 2 Easter bunnies on the balcony on the South Lawn. He mentioned that last year's was canceled due to the pandemic. The year before as well, in 2020, under former President Donald Trump, also canceled during the pandemic. President then went down and started some of those rolls with the wooden spoons.
Okay, ready, get set.
First Lady Jill Biden mentioning that the theme this year is education. It's actually egg-ucation, as the White House put it out. And in a reading area, the President First Lady reading Brown Bear, What Do You See to children, and then joining him on stage to read his own book, Jimmy Fallon, host of The Tonight Show on NBC.
Thank you.
First
Thanks
Lady.
for coming.
Thank you all for being here. How fun is this? Come on. This is so cool. Not only are you a first lady, but also Dr. Biden, but also your students call you
Dr. B.
Dr. B, and your grandkids call you
Nana.
Nana. Do you, any of you kids out there are you lucky enough to have a grandma or a Nana? What do you call your grandma? Do you call her Gammy? Nana? Abuela? Mima? There's some names out there, trust me, yeah. All right, I'm gonna read this book for you. It's about Nanas. It's called Nana Loves You More. And it's about how...
Tell them who wrote the book.
Oh yeah, by the way, best-selling author, Jimmy Fallon is the, please, thank you very much. Oh my goodness. Okay, here we go. It goes like this. And when you see a duck, by the way, when you see a duck, everyone yell, quack! All right, do it louder. All right, perfect, here we go. Nana will read to you and sing you to sleep and fill you with memories that you'll always keep. You don't see a duck yet, right? No duck yet. Forever from 1 past 104, you'll always love Nana, but Nana loves you more.
Jimmy Fallon, host of The Tonight Show, with President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden and a lot of children and adults at the White House Easter egg roll today. It's a tradition at the White House dating back to 1878. Some other celebrities in attendance today, actress Kristen Chenoweth and singer Ciara, and a lot of costumed characters roaming the grounds. Dr. Seuss's Cat in the Hat, Sonic the Hedgehog, Cookie Monster, Charlie Brown, the Minions, and the racing presidents from the Washington Nationals Major League Baseball Club. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Get more top Washington stories sent to you each day by subscribing to C-SPAN's evening newsletter Word for Word. You can sign up at c-span.org/connect. Hope you have a good night.